protectionism is also not helping your friends to concentrate more on yourself rather than the outside world. We know that the drastic cuts to USAID, the Agency for International Development, has already or is going to cost lives. Myanmar's recent earthquake, the Americans have been for decades maybe the most important first responder, sending hundreds of rescue workers. They sent 3 administrators. They didn't send a single rescue worker. They laid off recently some people working for the federal government on the US nuclear program. They realized very quickly within a couple of days that it was actually a national security issue, so they were told to come back to their office. The office said, sorry, they've been excluded from their federal email, so we can't get in touch with them. So they couldn't re-employ them. Professor Sachs, when you were president of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, it focuses, I've got to read this from the notes, it focuses on sustainable development, this institute at Columbia, including research in climate change, geology, global health, economics, management, agriculture, ecosystems, urbanization, energy, water, everything that we need to live. So how does protectionism affect these kinds of relationships between one country and another country?
Yeah,
it's actually deglobalization.
I want to answer that by continuing on with the brilliant explanation that that the minister just gave about the hard stuff and the easy stuff.
Yeah.
So just to say, in American politics, the swing states in the presidential elections in the last 3 elections in particular have been the Midwestern states. So those are states like Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota. These are states that can go either way. And those states did suffer a decline of employment in manufacturing, not only or even mainly because of trade, but also heavily because of automation over the last 40 years. I come from Detroit, which is Motor City, used to be, and I used to go when young on school field trips to see the assembly lines, and there were actually workers on the assembly line. But now if you go to an automotive plant, it's all robots, very, very few people inside. That's not because the jobs went overseas. In that case, that's because the assembly line itself became an automated phenomenon. So Trump is giving an answer to those swing states. It's China's fault. It's Mexico's fault. It's Lesotho's fault. What the minister said is really important, that when he said that trade benefits the economy, but it could hurt some sectors. And what you do is not stop the trade, but you make sure that you pull everyone along, maybe in a regional policy, or maybe in job reskilling, or maybe in some other kind of public investment or education policy. Here's where the US really failed over the last 40 years. We let the inequalities widen and widen, partly because of automation, partly because jobs did go overseas, but for the right reason. They had comparative advantage in those jobs. Skilled people got better and better salaries. Lower skilled people had their living standards fall. The gap widened. By the way, not just the income gap, the life expectancy became 10 years or more. So many of our epidemics, so many of our social problems relate to this widening inequality. The United States political system didn't address it at all for 40 years. And that comes to what I mentioned, the corruption of the political system. When candidates of both political parties are paid by rich donors for their reelection campaigns, and both parties then become the agents of tax cuts and no really addressing the social conditions, you end up with a Donald Trump coming in and selling a pseudo explanation, it's all China, and selling a pseudo remedy, a trade war. What the auto workers are going to learn right now is they're going to lose jobs by even the tariffs that have been put in place, because we need the intermediate parts brought in from elsewhere. Now they face higher costs, and the United States can't compete at all with Chinese electric vehicles. The United States has basically handed China the electric vehicle market for the next 20 years. So did Europe, by the way. Europe delayed the transformation to electric vehicles, said we produce great internal combustion engines, we're going to continue to do that. The world actually needs electric vehicles because of the climate crisis. So all of this is to say the real hard work is to think ahead. Mm-hmm. The country, by the way, in my experience of working all over the world in the last 40 years, that thinks ahead the most is China. Mm-hmm. China's success is not random. China's success actually is a lot of forward-looking planning. In 2014, China issued a document called Made in China 2025. And it wasn't a protectionist policy, it was we need to invest in the technology so we can be at the forefront. I think in 8 of the 10 sectors that were identified there, China succeeded in reaching the forefront. In 2017, China made a plan for artificial intelligence. This is already 8 years ago. DeepSeek didn't just come out of nowhere, it came out of a long-term strategy. So this is hard work that actually pays off. This is what every government should do. This is what every country should do, is look ahead. Now, you mentioned very interesting idea. We got a president who doesn't understand and maybe doesn't care about the future in the same way. But just to say, the biggest issue on the planet should be the climate crisis, not all the things we're endlessly talking about. And every part of the world is going to suffer terribly by what has been built in terrible, very dangerous climate change. It's out of the headlines. But, you know, I had a very difficult job. I was the director of an institute with 300 climate scientists for 14 years, some of the world's leading climate scientists. The reason it was a hard job is that every week they came up and told me, it's worse than we thought. They would give me endlessly grim news. And the lead climate scientist at Columbia University is a man named James Hansen, who I regard as the world's leading climate scientist. And he produced a study in January that said it's much worse than we have thought. The world's temperature has gone up by 0.3 degrees Celsius in 3 years. We have had 21 months of the last 22 above 1.5 degrees. That's the new baseline, by the way. That's not because of an El Nino effect. That's the new baseline. We already blew the limit that we set 10 years ago in Paris that we said we would not exceed. We're already above it. And what Hansen says is we're rising at an accelerating rate. Now the average rate is probably between 0.3 and 0.4 degrees Celsius per decade now on average. So we'll be at 2 degrees excess. What all of this means is profound danger 20 years from now, 25, 30, but we're already seeing terrible danger today. I don't want to minimize what's already happening. Los Angeles burned down, massive forest fires in Korea last week. It's everywhere. My wife and I are nonstop traveling. Every single place we go is some kind of climate crisis, literally. It's a drought, it's floods, it's heat waves, it's pest infestations, it's forest fires, and the sea level is going to rise by many meters, which is not great for Istanbul, by the way, and not great for coastal areas. It's very dangerous what is built into the system. Now, what is Trump's answer for this? Yesterday, King Donald issued an executive decree to bring back coal. It's willful destruction of well-being, willful. And that is, again, he pulled out of the Paris Agreement. What I'm hoping, ladies and gentlemen, is the other 192 members of the UN have to say, no, we're not entering a crazy land. We're going to take care of our future. Right now, I live in a crazy land. But the rest of the world has to avoid the crazy land, has to avoid normalizing this.